Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Gayer. I'm the co-executive director at the Catalog for Philanthropy in Washington, D.C., and also a member of the Next Gen Giving Circle in D.C. Excited to talk a little bit about grassroots media relations, how giving circles with limited capacity, right, limited time, can engage with local media, really get the story out there about the amazing work they're doing, but also the amazing work of their nonprofit grantees. So we'll go through a few very specific tips today that you can use for your giving circle about engaging with local media. The first of which really starts with what we're saying to them in the first place, right? So being really clear in our pitch. We really want to think through a little bit what we're telling them, right? Media, not surprisingly, gets a lot of stories thrown at them, has a lot of options for what they cover, and may not be familiar with giving circles, right? So they are familiar, obviously, with the nonprofit sector and kind of things happening in the community, but may not be familiar with your model. So it's really important we're very kind of crystal clear with them about what story we're trying to offer and what audience would be engaged by it. So the first thing we need to think about as a giving circle trying to connect with local media is what we're actually telling them, right? What's in our pitch? They're going to get a lot of messages from a lot of folks, nonprofits, foundations, right? Individuals, businesses. So they get pitches all the time, including about things happening in the community. So we want to make sure we're being as clear as possible, that they can quickly understand the story we're pitching them and quickly understand if this is a good fit for them. So a couple of things we want to do here in our pitch to make that work as well as it can for them. The first is really thinking about the flow of our story, right? And this might feel obvious, but that the pitch has a clear beginning, middle, and end. And really what this means for our pitch when we're thinking about the story that we're telling and the story we're trying to tell to local media is that we need to have some type of reason why they'd care, right? So a need, an opportunity, set the scene a little bit, be really clear about the local element of this, right? That's going to be something that's intriguing to them, and think about, from the beginning, what's in it for them, right? What would their audience want to know? Secondly, want to quickly highlight our pitch, the main part of the story, right? What happened? What are the main steps we're going to walk them through? And then finally, a little bit of a hint at the resolution, right? It doesn't need to be a perfect ending, but there's somewhere to land on, and usually some type of call to action for the audience about how they can get more involved. So when we're thinking about that pitch, we want those three things to be really tight, really clear, and for the media folks to be able to quickly understand how that story would progress, right? Another big thing we want to call out of this pitch is the why. So again, they're getting a lot of pitches. They're thinking about what will their audience engage with most. And the biggest thing here is they're thinking about what is that kind of emotional or logical piece that's going to intrigue their audience and be interesting for them to tell the story of. So we want a very quick explanation of the urgency of the situation. And again, it could be urgency because we're addressing a problem. Could be urgency because we're providing an opportunity. It could just be urgency of the issue, and we want to get this narrative out there about it. We want to drive home for them both why it matters and why it matters today. And then finally, the more specific, the better, right? So again, folks engage with stories that really have a scene set around it. So letting media know when we're pitching them a story that local professionals can sign up. We work with 75 local people in our giving circle, right? This is for nonprofits in this specific neighborhood, this specific community, that again is going to drive home that hyper local element and that really specific character driven element, which are two things media is looking for. The second thing we're thinking about here is when during the year is a good natural fit for us to reach out to media, right? For us to be telling them, hey, we have a story. Because not all times of the year, right? Do we probably have something we necessarily want to throw out there to them? So we really want to save it for when we have a big push happening. So the three natural times for a giving circle to be thinking about media engagement and how media can be helpful to them. One is around recruitment, right? So not surprising, we're trying to get new members. This is going to be a big push, right? To try to get new folks inside the giving circle. And media can be helpful, right? Letting new people know that this is an option for them about how they can engage civically. Why media may want to cover it. We are seeing people in general be looking for opportunities to get involved in the community, opportunities to get plugged in socially in their community. So pitching it to media as, hey, your audience may be looking for opportunities like this to do, right? It's not quite volunteering. It's not just donating. It's something different. And people may not have heard of it. And we think it'd be a great story for you to run, right? So helping them understand kind of what it is, but why that be maybe interesting for their audience. The second thing we can highlight here every year is when our application opens, right? So nonprofits can apply. So if you try to use media to get to more nonprofits, so they're aware that they could apply for funding, right? If we have kind of an open process. So this can be a good opportunity to highlight former grantees who we've served, who we've helped and supported. And also is a good chance to engage new nonprofits as well, right? And again, this is something they may want to announce because it's exciting, right? They know their audience is going to care. They have some kind of natural interest. This would be a good opportunity too, especially if you have some community-based newsletters that are maybe working directly with some nonprofits. And then finally, and this is probably the best one to be able to push out to local media and the one most likely to get picked up, which would be when you announce your new grantees, right? So really trying to drum up some excitement here, get people really excited to see who they are, to celebrate this win with those nonprofit organizations, to get them a little additional attention, right? Which is always something we're looking to do. But it's also an easy way to hopefully pitch to media, hey, this good news is happening. This money is going to nonprofits. They're going to do these incredible things. Let's run a story on that. And that story then is going to be a mix of both highlighting your grantees, but then also highlighting the work that you do, which is a good 1-2 there for media to possibly cover. The next tip here is around, when we say media, who are we really talking about reaching out to, right? Is it everyone? Is it just like the big kind of TV stations? What do we really mean here when we think about media? Obviously, it can be great to reach out to traditional media. So we're thinking radio, TV, major newspapers, right? Out of those newspapers are going to be your easiest, followed by radio and TV. And in some cases, TV is even easier than radio, only because radio usually has a really set way that they find their guests. For any of these traditional stations, it's really about focusing on developing a relationship. We're going to need to find a way to make sure that they feel connected to us, that they feel like we're a resource for them, and that when they're looking for a community interest story, we might be one that can help fill a gap, right? It's a lot easier for us to fit their story than for us to be the story. So for instance, they might be running a story on, this is volunteer, appreciation week. Do you all have any opportunities? And you could highlight your local nonprofits, right? Or you could highlight signing up for the Giving Circle or something. So often they're going to have a story that they're looking to put you in. So getting creative about how you could fit into that is really important there. But obviously the bar to get included in these traditional media spots, incredibly high, incredibly competitive. A lot of organizations are kind of going after this. So for those reasons and others, we often encourage folks to start with, or at least additionally look at, focusing on independent media sources. So really hyper local media sources. And what we mean by that is not your kind of big TV stations, but your local neighborhood newsletter, right? Or there's been a large proliferation of email newsletters, right? So looking for an old local email newsletter, an online neighborhood group, right? Nextdoor is one of those that comes up a lot of times. But looking at some of these kind of really local digital and or kind of print publications that exist, it's obviously a lower barrier to get included because there's just going to be less people kind of going after those spots. And they're naturally focused on what's happening in the community, right? What's happening on the ground locally. So when we think about those three moments during the year for us, when we are opening applications for nonprofits, they might be interested to include that, right? Because they want local nonprofits to know that they might be able to get some money. When we're recruiting members, they're going to want to share that, right? Because our members are probably coming from that local community. So they know there's going to be interest there. And when we're celebrating that victory, right, celebrating who won, right, what nonprofits are doing, that gives an easy story for them to run if they have some interest in. So while still all about relationships and going to take some time, these local media sources can be really helpful. Obviously, they're going to have a smaller audience, but also a much more engaged audience, an audience that's often more likely to be looking to do something with the information that they get. And then finally, it can be helpful to also ask our current audience, right? So ask our nonprofit partners, ask our members in our giving circle, right? Who do they currently get their news from, right? So especially our current members, right? How do you hear about stuff locally, right? How do you find out about what's going on? That can be a good kind of sourcing for us, especially for this independent media, as we hear some names a couple times to go back to start thinking about, hey, this might be a good source of spreading the word about what we do to get more members, more nonprofits, etc. Next, around ethical communication. So this is really thinking about ethical comms, but also ethical partnerships with our nonprofit grantees when we think about communications. Wanting to make sure that we're setting up an ask for them and a partnership with them in terms of media that's fair, right? That's kind of respectful, kind of their time. So a few things there. I want to be really upfront and clear about expectations with any nonprofits that we're including in kind of media announcements or stories that we're publishing. Let them know that, hey, we don't know this is going to drive any additional attention. We can't guarantee, right, donors are going to come from this, but we think it's a good opportunity to get your name out there, right? Also being kind of transparent about what we're asking for, right? We're going to need some photos sent, or we're going to need probably an hour of your ED's time for the interview, right? Like whatever that might be, I'm leading with that so they can decide kind of if it's worth it for them. We should always think about when setting up these interviews that are going to include our grantees in them, that's a mutually beneficial partnership, right? So meaning that there's at least a little bit of time that's spent talking about the giving circle and at least a little bit of time spent talking about the nonprofit that's included. We want to make sure both of those get highlighted. So both of us are kind of raising our name recognition there. Want to make sure that what we're asking nonprofits to do is not going to be a lot of new work, right? So again, not that they need to go out and take a bunch of photos of their programming, just can you bring some photos you have, right? Not that they have to develop whole new talking points. Can you just, have your ED come and kind of recycle some of the things they've been saying recently, right? We want to make it super easy for them so it's not a lot of work because we know how busy they are. And then finally, when we're thinking about, especially this is a written story that we're producing, one, running the language by our nonprofit grantees to make sure that they are kind of approving of that. And then secondly, that we're really thinking about, are we telling their story from their lens? Are we telling the story authentically? How are we talking about our role in it, right? Making sure we're avoiding that kind of savior complex and everything else that goes with that. And are we kind of being true to what they would typically communicate about their work? And then finally, the last tip we have here is just that we can be doing all of that, but then kind of forget about the fact that if media does get interested, right, we put a press release out and someone looks at it, we text or email or DM a reporter and they get back to us. One of the first things they're going to do is look up our giving circle online, right? They're going to take a quick look to see what our online kind of virtual presence is. And if we don't have one, that's going to be a red flag for them. And they're probably not going to get back to us about including us on a story. So the places they're going to look at our social. This is usually the first place, right? Again, they don't need to see anything amazing, right? They don't need to see, 3 posts a day, right? Or anything overly active. They just want to make sure we have some type of social media presence, that it's somewhat active, and that it looks kind of cohesive and professional, right? Bonus points there if whatever we're pitching them is included on our social media relatively recently, that's going to make them feel really good about it. But at minimum, I want to make sure it looks professional and relatively updated. Twitter is actually where we see most media engage. So obviously making sure our Twitter is up to date, then also our Instagram probably number 2 for media. The other thing we want to make sure that's updated, we often forget we have these days, I feel like, is a website, right? And we have one. So it's important to make sure that often reporters are going to go there second before they come back and say yes or no to us. So we make sure that if our social media is great, we haven't updated our website ever, right? It's still just like a very simple WordPress or something, it can still be very simple, but we want to make sure it looks professional, it ties to our social media so it feels unified, and relatively updated. So something on the site being updated within the last month to let people know that we are actively there. And the biggest thing across both of these, again, right, relatively recently updated, relatively cohesive, with a professional feel. So while there's a lot more we could say, those are 6 tips to engage your local media as a giving circle, and we hope they help. Thank you.